Hey everyone, this is Angela Stevens, and I am the podcast host to Refocus with Angela. I cannot wait to tell you about our guest today. She is such a dear friend, and I've gotten to know her both personally and professionally. But today we have Karen Goldner. And Karen Goldner, many may know her, many may not, but she is the managing director of established business programs and services for the WBDC. Now, that is the Women's Business Development Center, and you're going to learn so much about that, and you're going to learn more about Karen as well. So, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here.
You are so welcome. You're so welcome. So, first of all, for everyone out there that doesn't know what the WBDC is, can you kind of give us just a recap of what that is?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit business development organization. We are based in Chicago. We will be 40 years old in 2026. We serve 9 Midwestern states, and we work with all kinds of small businesses, not just women-owned businesses, but businesses that are from starting to succession planning, and everywhere in between. So we have several thousand businesses a year that we work with. As I said, we're based in Chicago, but we have offices in St. Louis, Kansas City, the Twin Cities, and Milwaukee.
Perfect. And I'm going to tell everybody how I met her because you're going to learn more about the WeBank organization in a minute. But how I met her, I got this email one day. I'm not even sure how I got on this email list, but it was an email and it was all about a course that I could take about running my business, about financials, about presentations, about meeting people, how to get into accounts, different things like that. And I thought, this is something that I need to do. And it was called Scale Higher. And that I believe was sponsored at the time by I want to say British Petroleum BP and
BP and Walgreens.
and
Yeah.
Walgreens,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
And
was the top shelf program.
yeah,
Yes.
right. And so I
So
went to
you've
the
done a
I went
lot.
to the top
Yes.
shelf and Scale Higher.
That's right.
And so it was phenomenal and I learned so much. And I want to just tell everybody a bit about how that happened. So I applied and you had to go through an interview, a real interview with the person. And I thought, I'm never going to get picked. There's thousands of people that apply. So what did I do? I applied to two programs and I was accepted for two programs, which for 8 to 20 weeks, I don't even remember, but it was
Yeah.
weekly and it was the best experience ever. So, first of all, before we go forward, if you are a business and you want to learn more about financials, running your business, hiring, different things like that, I encourage you to check out the WBDC, and that we'll put the website, but it's WBDC.org, and we're going to tell you more about that. But again, I'm probably one of their biggest fans. So, it's all about focus on this podcast. So, Karen, I want to talk to you before we get into this more about you. So you have a lot of responsibility and you speak and you are over a group of teams and you work with a lot of organizations. So your schedule, I'm sure, can get very busy. So how do you focus? Do you focus the night before for the next day or that morning, or what is your strategy?
Yeah. Well, and so this is going to be a lot of do what I say and less do what I do, because I don't do this all the time. But when I can, I do kind of like to look the day before to see, whether it's individual clients on my calendar or meetings or whatever, especially if they're external meetings or meetings that involve, different people. And then just, think about, okay, do I know the person? Do I need to look something up? Are they in our, database? Or, I mean, what do I need to know to kind of go into the meeting? So it's usually the day before.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is because I can manage a day's worth of stuff in my head
Yeah. Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than a week's worth. But sometimes I do look ahead, not so much for individual clients, but for just like if there's going to be a big meeting the coming week, and so then I can be more prepared.
Perfect. So are you IT or do you use a paper calendar?
Outlook. Yeah.
Outlook. Okay.
So
It's
so I like
interesting.
it.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people do both. And so I was curious on how you
Well,
manage
I
your
take
schedule.
notes in paper, in a
Okay,
paper
got it.
notebook.
Got it.
But my calendar I like to have just, online. It's just easier for me to manage that
Of,
way.
of course, of course. So talk to us a little bit about, first of all, how many people do you manage?
hmm Well, there's 10 people on the
Okay.
team. Yeah.
Okay. And so I know this for a fact. You allow them to do their job. I've seen it,
Mhm.
I've witnessed it, and I know it. And this, I want to ask this question for our CEOs, listeners out there that manage teams. it's easy to micromanage, right? And it's hard to sometimes let go and
Mhm.
delegate. How do you do that, and how would you recommend to others how to do something like that?
Yeah. Well, it starts with hiring, and you need to hire people that you believe will be good fits for the role. And part of that is you need to be able to communicate to them effectively what the role is, which means you need to know what the role is. And I sometimes I see people who kind of try to skip that step, and then you almost inevitably end up with a bad fit. But once you've hired the person, you need to make sure that they're well onboarded, and that is a tedious, annoying process. And if you skip it, you're going to be sorry.
Yes.
And that's something that's kind of iterative, and different kinds of jobs have different kinds of appropriate levels of onboarding or training or whatever. But so then once you get to the point where you have the people, um, when I started managing remote folks, so people I
Mhm.
was not physically proximate with, which was actually in this role. I mean, I've managed people over my career, but they've always been on site.
Yes.
So a friend of mine, I asked her what to do because she had been doing that, and she said she had a weekly check-in with folks, just scheduled for half an hour or whatever every week. And sometimes it gets canceled, or sometimes you have to
Yeah.
move it or whatever, but it really is then that person's time. And so if you have something that you need to discuss with them, you can kind of hold it for then. I mean, obviously, if something is urgent, you talk with them whenever it's appropriate. But, for the things that aren't urgent, and then similarly, they have something, they have that time too. And so they can kind of have an agenda of what that check-in is going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, it's not a bad idea with everybody, but I think it's especially important if you're managing people that you aren't going to just bump into. I mean, our Chicago staff, I see them all the time, right?
Right.
So if there's something, it's just really easy to have access to. So that's something, and so then I know what's going on with them, and we can deal with whether there are problems or just thinking through things. Um, but then the other thing I think is I'm someone who believes that there's lots of right answers. And I will say that it is enormously freeing when you get to the point, which is where I've gotten to, fortunately, where you can not feel obligated to solve all the problems yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, we have a problem, or we have a question, we have a challenge, we have, however you want to phrase it. So let's have the team think about an answer, because I have great confidence in the people I work with that somebody's going to be able to figure it out, or going to have really good ideas about how to do it. So, I think that it is hiring well, getting your people set up for success,
Mhm.
and letting them go and checking in a lot, and
Yeah.
being,
Yeah.
not feeling like, because like if I come up with what I think is the solution, then everybody else is going to say, well, okay, we better do this because Karen thinks so. And it's not maybe a great idea, but Karen says so, so we better do it.
Yeah.
And that's not a great thing. And plus, then you're taking on all of that responsibility yourself, or all of that, struggle yourself, and let your people help you make things better,
And
because they're
stress
not like
follows
you.
that if you don't.
Yeah,
I mean, as a CEO, you will encounter and feel that stress.
that's right.
It's
Absolutely.
interesting. One thing that I do with my company, I always ask them if we're creating a product. I always say, if it was your money personally and it was in your
Mhm.
savings, would you spend and this money and buy 10,000 of these and know that it would sell? And it makes them think, and it makes them think more. And I
That's
think
right.
employees, especially your management team, really appreciates that because it gives them accountability and makes them feel that they're a part. So I very much admire that
Absolutely.
in you, because I do that as well. And nobody likes to work for a micromanager. Nobody likes to
Right.
work for somebody that is always upset and running rampant. And I hear
Yeah.
that a lot. So I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah. And
and the
that
other,
one thing I was going to say is,
yeah.
that I think that that's really good, that you give people that context. And that was something somebody told me once years ago, is the most important thing for delegating is to give context.
Mhm.
So, like, if I say to somebody, call so and so, It's like, and ask them such and such, whatever. But if I mean, I don't know, how would you do that? If I mean, if somebody just tells me like 5% of the thing and tells me to go do it, I'm going to go do it if my
Yeah.
boss tells me to do that, but I'm not going to know why, or I'm not going to be able to be more than a note taker.
That's right. That's right.
Whereas if
You
I
hit
know what the context is, and like this is not just some random idea. This is a $10,000 worth of investment, and so is it a good idea? So you just help people.
yeah.
Giving them context is so valuable.
And it's interesting because we get a lot of questions from people that want to ask questions, and I have a few for you as well. And one of those was, in management, if you have a bad hire, um, and you've got to make a decision, but you like this person, I get this all the time. You like the person. How do you make the decision to let them go?
Yeah. Um, you know, it often, not always, and I will say this, firing somebody is the worst thing that you can do in business. I mean, in terms of experience, in my experience is
Yes.
nothing is worse than having to fire somebody, even when frankly they well deserve to be fired. I think in some instances, they may know they're not a fit, you know,
Yeah.
and so they may, I mean, this one woman, and she didn't make it through her, I mean, before her 90-day probationary period ended, it became very clear she was a bad fit. Now, I
Yeah.
will say this, I had anxiety about hiring her. I had a pit in my stomach, but
Mm,
I said to myself, we got to fill this position. So the person we really wanted wasn't available. So we're going to hire her and we'll make it work. And I mean, I know better than to do
your
that.
instincts, a woman's instinct, and
Yeah.
mine
I
too,
mean,
but a
I know
woman's
much,
instinct is always
I,
right.
I know much better than that, but I did it anyway, and she didn't make it 90 days.
Yeah.
And when we had the conversation about her performance, I think she found it relieving because
Yeah.
she knew she wasn't able to do the job either. So sometimes that is true. It's not always true, but sometimes it's true. I think the other thing that you have to kind of balance is what you need to do to protect yourself legally, which I
Yes.
mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to even try to opine on that. But you have to document things. You can't just let somebody drive you nuts and then one day you're fired. You can't do
Yeah.
that, right?
Right.
But you need to be able to document things. But I think you can also be kind about it
Yes.
and also not drag it on.
Yeah.
And not expect any particular response from the person.
Yeah.
And just it's not working out. Here's the issues. This is, whatever the reason is. And
Yeah.
so we're going to have to terminate your employment effective as of, usually like right now.
Yeah.
So go ahead and please get your stuff and leave. And, you know, there's just not a nice way to do it. But I will also say that if you keep, depending again on what's wrong, what the person's issues are, if you keep them around because it's easier to keep them around, that really harms morale of the other employees, right? They're
You're
like,
gonna harm
hey,
your
I'm working
business.
hard, I'm
Yeah.
doing good things, and so is not getting anything done or is causing these problems or whatever the issues are.
Yeah.
And we're all getting paid about the same, so what's up with that?
Yeah.
So that and then that person who is not performing can also just cause all manner of havoc.
Oh, and
So
talking to
so
your
you
employees,
have to
it
do
can
it,
it
right?
can it can it can go onward. Before I started Refocus 7 years ago, I've been a recruiter for 30 years, and kindness. You made a comment about that, and I love that because kindness is something we put at the forefront of our business, and everybody I hire, that's one of the biggest things. I'm like, we treat our customers kind, but we treat our coworkers as well.
Hmm.
But one thing I have learned as being a recruiter that's worked for me is if the person is nice and they've done a good job, I usually make notes on what they're good at. And this is my recruiter part of it. But I always give them suggestions, maybe on new ideas and new careers that they might be better at. And I have
Hmm.
found if they're open, then that has actually led to some fantastic relationships in my background. So
I
that's
think
just
that's great.
hygiene for
Yeah.
anyone listening. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then, okay, so let's talk about a little bit about business too, with the WBDC. So, I'm going to guess because I've been through the program, a lot of your programs, But I would say a lot of people that come to you that have businesses usually are facing finance issues, right? With
Mhm.
they bootstrap their company and they're getting to a point that, and then also, how to, they're kind of at a. It seems like I think you get. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think you get people right when they need something, whether if it's
Yes.
leadership or they need funding or they need how do I pitch and get this product in here, right? Tell us a little bit about maybe things that you have seen with businesses that they've come to your programs and they've learned and that's helped them.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, you're exactly right, and I guess it's sort of logical. If everything was going great,
Yeah,
we probably wouldn't see them.
right.
So it's I guess I've seen all sorts of things, from what I would call good problems to things that are really a mess.
Yeah,
To me, a good problem is I'm growing and I need financing to help me to continue to grow, or those kinds of things. Um, and so it really is all over the map. I would say that um, the Top Shelf program that you had talked about is really focused on people who have small CPG companies.
hmm,
Small is, maybe $50,000 a year even, or it could be more, but they're selling through non-mass retail channels. They're selling online. They may be on Amazon. They may be selling at, vendor fairs. They may be in, a couple, three boutiques in their town, or, whatever. It's
right.
small scale. And they want to get into the large kind of big box retailers of the world. Or maybe not even big box, but like a Walgreens, or, I mean, in large chains. And
Yeah,
so helping people shift their mindset from my customer is the person who buys and uses my product to my customer is, in addition, I guess I would say maybe not shifting your mindset, expanding your mindset, because the
yeah,
the consumer continues to be the person at the end of the day who's, making all this work. But you also have a retail buyer or a category manager, they're called different things, but the person at the retailer who is the one who makes the decision and who purchases your product to put into the stores. And that person has a very different set of concerns than a consumer, right? If
yes,
if I mean, with your products, Angela, obviously, with paper schedulers and products like that, um, if you're trying to sell to just me as a consumer,
hmm,
I mean, I need to want a paper calendar. I mean, I need write all the things, but a retailer is going to want to know, how does this actually fit in my store?
right,
Where does it fit? How does it compete or complement similar products I have, right? So that's and maybe one way to think about what we do, and I hadn't thought about it until just now, is that a lot of what we do is help people expand their focus,
yes.
or expand
Think
their, I guess,
differently. Yeah,
focus or
yeah,
their mindset, right? To
hmm,
just, it goes from just this over here to a wider set of, whether it's customers or on the financing side. You
hmm,
know, a lot of people are very debt averse, in their personal lives. I mean, I'm debt averse in my personal life. I don't buy a car if I can't pay cash, which
right,
means, I tend to have older cars, and I'm completely fine with that. Um, but in a business, sometimes you have to look at debt as a source of funding and what are you going to do with it. Now, I'm
right,
certainly not suggesting that everybody run out with their business and take on a lot of debt, but it's whereas on the consumer side, me, just as a person, for instance, with car, I mean, I'm not using that car to make money. Right. That
right,
car is completely an expense to me. I mean, I'm using it to get to work. I'm using it to do this or
right,
that. And it's important that I have it, but it is consumption. As opposed to, for a business, you should look at the decisions you're making, the investments you're making, as investments
yes,
to create more revenue, or at least to improve your bottom line by being more efficient. And therefore, it's a lot easier to, in a way, really to evaluate whether a decision's a good idea. Should I build this new building? Well, I don't know. What are you going to do in the building? How does the building help your business? All
right.
of those things. And therefore, you can kind of determine what sort of revenue or profit you should expect from this new expansion. And then you can determine whether it makes dollars and cents to spend the money in order to get that reward. Yeah.
Right. And there's so many resources because I remember when we first started, we're now on, Amazon, Walmart, Wayfair, Shein, Temu, Staples. We're in a lot in education, universities, a lot, and we've really grown in a matter of 7 years. And I remember, I thought, at first you think everybody's going to love your product, right? But because you love it, right? But that you
Yeah.
have to realize, okay, if I'm the buyer from the company, is are our customers going to love it as much as she does, right?
Right.
And how are we going to present it to them, right? How
Hmm.
how will they
Hmm.
understand why they're buying it? So it's not all about you, it's not about your product. But
Right.
I want to say something to any CEO that's listening, that is growing. When we first started, everybody said you need distributors, right? So we got distributors, and unfortunately, and I won't say who they were, but they didn't do anything, and I expected them to perform. But after about 3 or 4 months, I thought, I've invested all of my money into this.
Right.
This is my baby. And so, you gotta shake the trees. So I
Hmm.
basically got us into every single account on our own. And so sometimes you have to be your biggest advocate, and you've got to know how to pitch.
You
You've got to
absolutely
know how
do.
to present, and that is where the WBDC can help you because they can help you. I know for a fact, one of the programs, I think it was Top Shelf, you had to have your product, you had to have a presentation, you had to
Yep.
pitch, and not just to Karen's staff. She brought
Right.
in some of the leaders with Wells Fargo, with Walgreens, with all these different companies, and you don't know who you're pitching to, and it's at the end of the course. It's really fantastic. So that's something that I would encourage everybody to just think differently. And if you do sign up and take one of your courses, Karen, and I want to get to this in a minute, her staff will get back to you. And this was my next question from another person that wrote into us. They said, I'm inundated with emails, and
Mhm.
we all are, right? We all are.
Yeah.
But they said,
Exactly.
I can't seem to get back to people I need to get back to in a timely manner, and I can't keep up. And so I thought about you because every time I have contacted Karen, I get a phone call or an email that same day or the next day. So for everyone listening, what's your trick?
Well, this is kind of embarrassing. It's because if I don't do it within 24 hours, I will forget to do
Yeah.
it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I just have to do it. And I also, I use my calendar as just also a place to make um to be a to-do list, so
Mhm.
I just like if somebody sends me an email, this afternoon or something, and I'm not able to get back to them, and I know, for instance, that tomorrow I'm not going to be able to get back to him. I'll put a note on my calendar for, the day after saying, contact so and so, and then I'll just remember to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but I also, it's like I hate cleaning my car, so I just try to keep it clean. I mean, I don't throw stuff in it or whatever. I mean, I'm that way with email. I just
Yeah.
try to make sure that I'm always on top of it because when you get behind, you get behind.
Yes. And you
The
miss
other thing, I
deadlines.
guess, yeah, is that there's the stuff that just doesn't matter. And you just, and we all get, I mean, so many just junk emails, right? So I don't feel any sense of obligation to respond to email that is clearly mass email or AI or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's phishing. I mean, obviously you delete that stuff, but just it's like, no, I am not the IT buyer for our agency, and I don't know the person who sent me this email, and I'm not going to buy from them. So I just don't feel obligated to even
Yes.
respond to that.
Right.
So, who you need to be able to discern who are the important people. And if you're getting, for instance, a ton of like customer emails, maybe, you might think about whether there's a tool like on your website so that when those emails come in, maybe they're all like have the same subject line or something like that, that you can easily sort them, or somehow that you can figure out what to do with them. But it and having some standard responses just like written on a Word document or whatever, Google Docs or whatever system you use, that you can kind of cut and paste a little bit easier in your responses. So if you have a lot of people who are asking basically the same question and you're going to give them basically the same response. You
Yes.
can write that response once and then just basically cut and paste that language. And you might have to edit it a little bit to make it, appropriate for the specific question. But I think, that's another thought. But it's challenging. It is
Yeah.
really challenging. The other thing that I also have found that I've done over the last little bit is I've become aggressively an unsubscriber.
Yes.
If I get one email from somebody that I don't even know who these people are, I didn't sign up for this, I just unsubscribe at that minute. And that kind of helps keep a lot of that stuff from growing.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing, and I'll just add, this is a tip for everyone listening, something that we did that works for us is we get a lot of emails as well. And so we will do a shared, if you use Outlook, we use like a shared mailbox and call
Yes,
Outlook and set it up where if it could be a different one. Like for instance, for accounting, we'll put, accounting at Time to Refocus, something like that. And then it'll go to
absolutely.
3 members or two or whoever. And that way you're always on top. So that's
That's right.
something just, especially that's for me, just a
Yeah,
little
no,
tip.
I think that that's really helpful. And for a business owner, and I don't work with the brand new startups the way I used to, but one of the things that I used to kind of suggest to people when they're first starting their business is have two email addresses, even if it's just Angela.
Yeah.
You should have an Angela at your company URL, and you should have like an info at your
We
company
have
URL.
both, and we have an A
Now,
Steven, or I have like
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
A Stevens, whatever it is, your name, but then also have a more generic one. And in the short term, everything still goes to you because you're the only person in the company, et cetera. But it does let you, to your point, later as you grow, break off that info at, for
yeah,
instance, to go to, and maybe even to go to a virtual assistant
yes,
or somebody, right? Somebody else, and then they can go through and take out a bunch of the crud
yeah,
and then
yeah.
surface to you, the 20% of the emails that you actually need to see, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
it's so true. It's so true because, like I said, you can get inundated, and that's one of the things that people ask me the most on this podcast is, ask your guests, how do they manage the email?
Right.
How do they manage that? So I think that's a really, really, really good piece of advice. And also, ask your staff. One thing I'll do is I'll say, guys, I'm overloaded. If I had a personal issue with my family or something, I'd say,
Mhm.
what can you help me take off my plate? And they would say, why don't we do this? And it was something we
Yep.
hadn't done. So it's a really good practice just to ask, if you're a CEO, it's okay to ask your staff for help because they'll,
Absolutely. I mean, it
they'll
gets
be
back
right
to
there.
that. Let them help solve the problems. And,
Yeah,
I have also had business owners, and this is always when they're newer, it's like, well, I just need another me. It's like, well, first of all, that's not going to happen.
right.
So let's just let that concept go. Second of all, even if it were possible, it's probably a bad idea.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
this is something that people, I mean, like I say, I've done hiring over my career, and I've been fortunate to have some good bosses who kind of help give me good advice or whatever over the years. So I've learned a lot. And we all have a tendency to like people who are like ourselves, right?
yeah,
I mean, most of the time our friends are going to be like us in some ways or another, right? And that's fine. But when you're building a team, that range of opinions, dare I say the word diverse, but people who think differently, who come from different
mhm,
experiences, who can do different things, who have different strengths. I can tell you what my organization does not need is another person like me.
right, right,
And
right,
so I really, when I'm hiring, I try to I mean, first of all, the job itself drives a lot of those requirements, but and as a result, we have a wide range of talent on our team, and we're just able to be much more, I think, successful than we would be if I were trying to hire a bunch of little Karens.
right, exactly. In my search firm, I placed the head of R&D at a company. It was similar to Amway, but the person at the top that I placed, she made a statement, and I asked her, I said, "What is your leadership style?" And her answer will stay with me forever. And she said, "It starts at the top."
Yeah,
That was
for
it.
sure.
And I was like, wow, that's Thank you. That's powerful. So anyway, so that's great. So okay, so going back to WBDC, I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you a little bit more, but let's talk about WeBank for a minute. So
Yeah.
WeBank is an organization that you have to be a 51% owner to be in
Right.
the WeBank organization. What is different between
Yeah.
WeBank and WBDC? Because I think there's a real disconnect of people understanding who
There
they are
is.
and who you are.
Yeah. So WeBank, which stands for Women's Business Enterprise National Council, is a national organization that certifies businesses that are women-owned. As you said, Angela, 51% or more women-owned. They need to be, the companies need to be controlled by women. The CEO needs to be a woman, et cetera. And WeBank actually makes the rules for that certification. Then there's a network of nonprofit, and they're a nonprofit, and they're a network of nonprofit organizations around the country that, depending on where your business is headquartered, you basically have, you work with a particular, what they call regional partner organization, that we have a geographic territory. So for instance, Refocus is in
Missouri.
Missouri. That is one of our 9 Midwestern states that we serve. And so you get certified under the WeBank rules, but by us, the Women's Business Development Center. That's the only program that we operate where you do need to be a woman-owned business.
Yes.
And so if you were based in, Colorado, you would work with another organization. Again, and when I say based in, I mean headquartered in. So for instance, like I know, Angela, you work with companies or with people all over the country, and that's all fine. It's just, where is the company headquartered? And then it is a national certification. So for instance, if you were dealing with Dollar General and they're based in Tennessee, well, that's fine. It's all the same certification. So on the corporate side, the WeBank certification is really generally the right one to get. If you're selling into governments, it can be different. And that there's,
And they
yeah,
certify, I'm certified with WOSB. So they
right,
certify
which is the
that
federal
along.
government certification
That's
to
right.
sell to the federal government. The easiest way I think to think about certification is to think of it as a marketing tool. And so, another kind of marketing tool is having an Instagram account. So should you have an Instagram account? Well, I don't know. If you are selling consumer products, well, you should definitely have an Instagram account. And if you are selling enterprise software to Fortune 50 companies, then that would be silly. So it just depends, right? So what certifications should I get, if any? It just depends on who you want to sell to.
Mhm.
And if I'm making, super premium salsa, then it doesn't make sense for me to get certified by the city of Chicago, for
Right,
instance,
right.
because they don't buy super premium salsa. So why would I bother? If I were a construction company and I, did concrete work, then I should be certified. So you just have to think about that kind of thing. And I guess maybe it's not the only topic like this, but it's one of those topics that the more you Google it, the more confusing it gets.
Yes.
And
And
so,
again, all you got to do is call or
yeah,
ask.
if you're a women-owned business in the United States and you're wondering about certification, the best, no matter where you are in the United States, the best place to start would be the WeBank website, wbenc.org.
Mhm.
And if you're in our Midwestern region, look at our website, wbdc.org. And then you can make an appointment. We don't charge for the appointments, obviously, and happy to kind of talk through. And if I think that you shouldn't get certified, I will definitely tell you that. And I tell probably one person a week. It's like, yeah, I don't see that this would be beneficial. And often I mean, much of the time, they will be like, yeah, I didn't think so either. But so and so kept telling me that I should get certified. It's like, yeah, no, you were right. It
So the
doesn't make sense.
resources, I mean,
But
I can't
yeah,
emphasize so much that all it takes is an email, a phone call to your
yeah,
organization. You guys will direct them
yeah,
to where they need to
absolutely.
be. We're certified with WeBank, WSB, SBA, Disability, and ACDBE and 889. So it's an overkill for me.
Yeah,
However, we reach a lot of different markets, right? And so again, we may look
right.
at those later and go
And
back. WeBank and no way,
yeah.
no way.
Well, and there's the right path is not the same path for
That's
everybody.
right.
And
That's right.
so your company has a path given what you sell and how you
Yes.
sell it and who you want to sell it to. And others do as, and that really is, I think, where people sometimes, well, my friend who does engineering for a utility company, and that's what her business does, and she's killing it with her WeBank certification. And I have small business accounting firm and she thinks I should get certified and I'll tell her, no, I don't think you should.
Yeah.
Whatever,
Yeah.
right?
And
So
it's a process.
if you're doing corporate audit, that's a different story. So it depends on who you're selling to. So
It's a
that's just
process.
one piece of what we do. And I want to just be really clear that all of the other services that we offer, and like you were talking, Angela, about the Top Shelf program and Scale Higher, which is another virtual cohort we do that's sort of industry agnostic, and our one-on-one advising and our government contracting services and our international trade center, and just, general how to start a business. All of those services are available to any small
Anyone.
business
Yeah.
in
Hmm.
Illinois.
Yeah.
And if you're not in Illinois, we work with, for instance, the Missouri SBDC if in your case or whatever, and can get you, referred out to sort of an appropriate partner, or sometimes we are able to work with you if you're not in Illinois. So just,
Right? They're not just going to
yeah,
sign you up. They're going to tell you, hey, this is a good fit or it's not.
yeah,
And I highly admire that. And I have to share something with everyone because it'll be so informative. So there are webinars that you guys have in different regions. And I love learning. I'm just a sponge for it. And so there was I think it was a WBDC event on the West Coast, and it said, ask anything. And I thought, perfect. And I signed up, and it was at 6 o'clock at night. And I thought, well, that's kind of an odd time for a webinar, but hey, usually you go on there and there's, 30, 60 women or whatever. And I go on there and they said, well, hello, Angela. And I thought, where's everyone else?
creepy.
And they said, we wanted to do this. You signed up for this. And I said, well, they said, let me stop you. They said, we want to help you, but we only help people. I think it was in Montana.
Okay.
They said, but what you need to do is you need to go to your PTAC coordinator in
Mhm.
Missouri. And I sat there and I go, I have no idea what a PTAC coordinator is. And it was procurement technical assistance.
And now it's called Apex. They've changed
Apex.
the name, so now
And
they're called
Apex,
Apex
as a matter
Accelerate.
of fact, we interviewed Alan Waldo with the Missouri Apex on here. So he's one of our interviews, so you can
Yeah,
check him out. But they will help you learn so much about procurement and how to do certain things. So I'm just saying, if you are a business owner and you feel like you are all alone and it's lonely at the top, it's not. There are resources for
right.
you and networking
Absolutely.
events. The WeBank conference is coming up. You'll meet a ton of people,
Mhm.
whether it's this year or next year if you go. It's delightful. And so I think, like I said, I'm a member of both, and I think I've been with you guys for 6 years or so.
Yeah,
And
I think that that's right. It's
yeah,
been
and
quite a
it's been
while.
a
Mhm.
terrific, and I will say it's not easy. You have to go through, you have to give your financials, you have to go through an interview, with it. And it makes it even special because you
Yeah,
know that you're not just taking my money to be in WeBank or something like that. And you're
right.
not taking my money to take a program. You really have the best of heart to help business owners.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for saying that because we do. And it's really just such an honor to work with small business. I mean, that's like my favorite thing to do. Um, the, the, I will say this, if you are in, you know, well, let me start it this way. Getting certified is, as you said at the very beginning, Angela, more than that 51%. And so if you own your business with a male, or I'll say with a non-female, and what I mean by that is maybe you have an investment group that owns 30% of your company, something like that. So some, entity that doesn't have a gender. Um, if you're in our 9 states, I think I would like to talk to you before you apply because we want to make sure that you're set up for success, right? And because it has to do with the control in your business, in your bylaws or your operating agreement needs to show that if maybe I own 51% and some guy named Fred owns 49%, well, does my operating agreement allow me to make decisions without a 2/3 majority vote, for instance? Am I the president and he is the vice president, as opposed to one of us is the CEO and one of us is the president? Is this in an area of industry that I have expertise in? I could create a business that's 100% owned by me, that's a construction company, and I can promise you I would never get certified. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I watch a YouTube video to change batteries, and I'm actually not joking.
Right, right.
So, that's just not my expertise. And so, the certifier would look at me and say, well, who's actually running this business, Karen? Because it's clearly not you. So, so those are the kinds of things that we look at. So sometimes people do just think, oh, we'll transfer 1% from the husband to the wife, and then that'll be that. And that those companies tend to get denied, unfortunately. I mean, I say unfortunately, because I'd rather they not go through the process, right?
Right.
If your business doesn't qualify, let's either figure out, if you're able to do what you need to do to qualify, or if it's like, running a business is hard. And if Karen and Fred doing it 50-50 is the way to make that business successful, then that's what we should do, but then not bother with getting certified because it'll just be, a source of unhappiness. So
Right.
there's
And I
enough
know
unhappiness in the world.
exactly. And I know to our audience, I know this is a lot of information,
Yeah.
but break it down, take it one
Yep.
step at a time. Reach,
WeBank.org
yeah,
would
and
be
we'll
the
put the
place to
website
start.
and reach out to them, check it out. But again, take it from me, it's worth your time to just find out because
Yeah.
Karen and her staff, they will, if they don't help you, they will send you to the right people and the right organizations that will help you to create success. And I think that is the biggest, best amount of time that you can take out of your day to do. So don't wait. So we'll put this on our podcast. We'll put the link on there as well. But Karen, I got one last question for you. So
Yes.
as we all, we're all human, right? And we all get busy. And, we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And, you're not, but on those days, let's just say it's a day that you've got to present, to your board or to your staff or something, but you're just not there. You are not Karen. It's not one of those days. And you get in your car or you're on the train. What is the music that, or the genre or the artist that you listen to that gives you game on?
I love the song Happy by Farrell. I mean, I just, and since you asked me that question to think about earlier, now it's been in my head, and sometimes you get a song in your head and it drives you nuts, but I love having this song in my head. So
I
yeah.
love that. I love that. That's so great because you know what? At the end of the day, family is important. The people in our lives are important. And if it's your business is your business. Take that time for special people. So happy is a fantastic choice to kind of bring it back down. And I always say in our business, we all get so busy that sometimes we need to stop, take a moment,
Yep.
and refocus. So, Karen, thank you so much for being on our podcast
Thank
today.
you.
This has been delightful. I know you're going to help so many people. And again, I graciously appreciate your time.
Even more than a pleasure.
Perfect. See, you were great. Look at that. You were awesome. Yay. So awesome. That was it. And that was actually really great. It was lengthy and it
Okay.
was informative. I hope you felt like it was,
Yeah.
I hope we covered a lot of things that might help people
Yeah.
that want to know more about you. And so perfect. So,
Yeah.
okay. So this last one is real easy. Do you need to take a break? Are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. All right, it's real easy. We start out the same way, and I usually just keep this going for my producer, and that way he cuts it up and it works. So, anyway, so we're gonna just go with this, and I'm gonna say if you haven't heard Karen on the Refocus with Angela, check that out, and then we'll do that vice versa. So,
Okay.
okay, are you ready? Okay, so here we go. We're just gonna keep on going. Hey everyone, it's Angela Stevens with the podcast Refocus Careers, and we have got Karen Goldner with us today. She is the Managing Director of Established Business Programs and Services for the WBDC. If you've not heard of that, that is the Women's Business Development Center. She's in Chicago. She's a dear friend of mine. If you have not heard the interview with her on Refocus with Angela, please check it out because you will learn so much about what she does, what her company does, the services for businesses. So check that out. But Karen, thank you so much for joining us.
So great to be with you.
You bet, you bet. So, all this podcast is all about careers and how you got where you were, and if you knew you were going to do what you were going to do now 20 years ago. But tell us, first of all, did you know you would always be with an organization like WBDC?
Never, never. I mean, when I went to college, I just thought that I'd end up working for the federal government, I guess, because I didn't really, I was a poli-sci major and I really, kind of liked public policy and stuff like that. And I never actually, I mean, of all the places I've worked, I've never worked for the federal government. But I started, I mean, I think of my career path as sort of like a wandering walk through a meadow more than anything
Yeah, and
else.
she went to the University of Nebraska,
I
right?
did. I
And
did.
then
Go
she got her
Huskers. Yeah,
MPA from Indiana University, I believe, right?
that's right. That's right. When I lived in Fort Wayne. And so, yeah, so I worked, I initially, like while I was in college, I did get an internship with a state senator, just as an internship. And he was an attorney, so I worked for him then one summer. And then I kind of leveraged that into when I moved to Indiana from Lincoln, because at the time that's where my husband was from. And he knew of another attorney, so I kind of talked myself into a job with him, and worked there for a while, and then started with the state of Indiana with the Indiana Employment Security Division, and worked there for about a year and a half, and then got on with the city of Fort Wayne and
Great.
worked for several roles for them over the course of, I think, about 17 years. And then kind of burned out around 2000, just with the economy kind of crashing, and I was running economic development there at the time. So I had an opportunity with an entrepreneur and kind of learned how to do some of the sort of early stage investment stuff. Because, one of the jobs I had with the city was actually running a small business lending program. And I've always been fortunate enough to be able to have either formal or informal training of, places where I've worked. Um,
And I want to interrupt you
yeah.
real quick.
Yeah. It
Economic,
just keeps going. You had no
no, no.
idea it was this long a
Oh,
story.
no, no, no. I want to hear it, but people don't know this. I was a search firm for 30 years, but before that, I worked at our Chamber of Commerce for 2 years. And I learned, I tell you what, that was the best job because I learned so much, met so many people, still have those contacts.
Yep.
But economic development, I learned that. And I think a lot of people, especially our young adults, they hear the term, but they don't know what economic development means. So,
Yeah.
because you've kind of really been around that term all your life, you mentioned that. Can you explain what economic development is to people that maybe have no idea?
Yeah, it means a lot of things, and that's why it's sort of confusing.
Yeah.
So, economic development can mean anything from, you know, organizations that are either local government or nonprofits in a community whose job it is to bring and help bring new companies to your town or to expand the companies that are already there, to working with small businesses and entrepreneurs to help them develop, and kind of everything in between. So it's really a lot of different kinds of things, typically done by nonprofits and or government agencies that support private businesses.
Yes.
So, that's probably the best way to think about it. But because it is so broad,
Yes.
it's,
Okay. So that was really good. So continue, but I learned that early on, but I realized people don't know what that means. And
right.
economic development is the core center of businesses today. So
Yeah,
so
that's right.
continue. So
That's
anyway,
right.
so you went
Oh,
in that
sure.
direction.
So then I worked for this private group for a while and kind of learned a little bit about business investment. And then in 2000, late 2007, 2008, when, things sort of cratered during that period, um, we had raised a small amount of investment to put into small businesses, and this was in the Fort Wayne, Indiana area. And that fund was basically invested at that point. And I knew we weren't going to be able to raise another one. So I found another job with another investment group, small business investment group in Fort Wayne. I mean, I literally pushed my chair across the street, literally across the street, to this other group that had capital, and they were looking for somebody to run their fund. So I did that for several years, and then during that period, one of the companies that my group bought, um, I had been deeply involved in. We needed somebody to run that company. So I was like the interim president of this little factory,
Wow.
for about a year. And I knew early in that period, I mean, I did that for a year, but soon after I made that commitment, which was always going to be interim, I realized I really wanted to leave. I was sort of having a midlife crisis. So then I drove around for 6 months and ended up in Chicago.
Lovely.
Was gonna go into kind of consulting business with a friend. That sort of fell apart before it even got started. Ended up then connecting back into northern Indiana, with some folks who I had known when I had been in Fort Wayne, and worked for them for a year and a half, and then started with the WBDC. And I will say that this is like my capstone great job.
I
I
love
love
it.
the
I love it. And
organization.
and
It's
tell
just,
us,
it's the
okay, so
best.
first of all, for anyone that doesn't know what the WBDC is, I will
Mhm.
say, as I mentioned on the other podcast, that I have gone through several programs. It's all, if you're a business owner, check them out. They have great programs on, how to run your business,
Even
finances,
if, even
how
if
to,
you're not a woman, the
yeah,
W stands for Women's Business Development Center, but we work with all businesses.
absolutely, for anyone. And they have a lot of courses, and it's worth your time. And you can check those out at WBDC.org. We'll put a note there. But tell us, so you found this. So did you? I mean, when you found them, did you say, "Wow, do I want to work for this company?" Or did you know about it, or how did you come?
I found out about them because there was an article in the Tribune a few months after I moved to Chicago. Our outgoing now CEO, Amelia Domenko, was just coming in as CEO. So there was an article about her. So I reached out, and Amelia is one of those people who will respond to an email. I mean, she's amazing. And so I came in for sort of, it was kind of an interview, more of an informational interview, but it wasn't a fit at the time. And then about 3 months later, I had started with this Indiana group, and then they reached out. And so I was like, I just started with this other company. I'm not, I mean, I can't just leave them like that. Anyway, so we went back and forth like that for about a year and a half. And then finally, the right time was the right time. And so I started with them. Um, and I guess all the other things during, like when I was in Fort Wayne, at one point I was also on the city council for
Mhm.
a term, which was super interesting and mostly fun. And I also kind of taught like just night classes at Indiana Purdue Fort Wayne, now called Purdue Fort Wayne, which was also super fun and interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of like intro type classes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's interesting. I look at your background, right? And you've got working with city, you got funding, finance, you've got working with the political, area as well, and nonprofit and organizations. And that's a really great direction because you can use those skills to go anywhere because your degree was in political science, right? And so for anyone that has that degree, that's a great run in terms of where you could use that degree. But talk to us about where you're at now. What is it like to be a managing director? What is a managing director of a not-for-profit company like this? What do you guys do? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
hmm So I work with a team of about 10 people, and we do the Women's Business Enterprise Certification, which is one of the programs that the WBDC offers. It is the only one where you need to be a woman-owned company to participate. And so, that is a lot of just processing, file review and all that kind of stuff. And so several people on the team do that, and I work with them on that, kind of oversee that. I do a lot of time just spending time with clients who have any number of different issues, kinds of problems. And so sometimes I have to do some research for them. Sometimes it's stuff that we can just kind of talk about. And then I'm also involved in some of our program planning. Most of our programs are delivered by some of my program staff, but I do some of it. And then I work with them on the others. So we're developing programs. It is a nonprofit, so we also do kind of fund development, working with some of our corporate partners and some of our funders to make sure that we're able to provide the kinds of deliverables and results that they're looking for, and to help them. Many of our corporate partners in my department are really focused on finding great vendors,
Yeah.
suppliers and vendors. And so, I sending out names and, so it's a lot of different things, which I love. I
Yeah.
am not the kind of person who would be able to do the same thing 40 hours a week.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just say, I've gone through several of their programs, including Scale Higher and Top Shelf. One is really more in leadership and business. One is more in retail. And so, if you own a business and you are interested in this, take it from me. I'm one of their biggest fans. I highly recommend looking into it because when you apply, they actually interview you to take a course. Okay. And I just want to say this. I said it in the last interview, but I interviewed for two because I thought there's no way I'm going to get into both of them. And I did, and I did them at the same time. Don't do that, but I did it and I loved it. But it was an opportunity to, first of all, make myself better as a business leader and know, hey, I'm doing this right, or I'm not, or I could be doing this better. They on the Top Shelf, it was like, how do you get a product into retail? I have to say, I was a corporate recruiter for 30 years, still have my search firm, but getting a consumer product onto retail shelves is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and
Yes.
I've done it. But with the WBDC's programs, I was able to learn how to pitch better. I was learning how to pitch to corporate vendors. It was so exciting. It was, and it's a serious program. So that is so exciting. So their organization, number one, is exciting. But and the people that work there, I want to give just like, for instance, if I were interested in working at the WBDC, the kind of people that work for you, I'm just going to take a guess here, are people that can do multiple things at once and multitask, have to be very organized, and have to be a team player and have a passion for helping businesses. Tell
Yeah,
me,
I
is
mean, I
that
think that
right?
that's
Or
100% right. And
okay,
it's in some industries there tends to be a little bit more of a sort of well understood career path. If you want to become a CPA,
right?
you tend to do certain things. And that's not to say that every CPA takes that same path, but most do.
Yes,
In our line of business, it people come from all different walks of life. I mean, we have former business owners, we have people who have worked in the title industry. Actually, one of our gals worked in the title industry before. So I mean, it's just all over the map, right? And so it really is that kind of multi ability stuff, or multiple types of experience is really super helpful. And I think that is something. I mean, I would never have seen myself doing this when I was 20 years old.
yeah.
And I mean, if you told me that I was going to do anything at all with math when I was 20 years old, I would have said you were an idiot. Um, but I really love a lot of the kind of, I mean, not accounting in the sense that I'm some sort of accountant, but looking at numbers and analyzing them. And I love that.
Yeah.
And that was
She's
not
great
part
and
of
she
my,
helps you.
it was
Yeah.
not part of my self-image, when
Yes.
I was a young person.
Yeah.
So I think that, just being open to sort of letting yourself become kind of fully yourself, and but also recognizing that you're not, I mean, you're still going to have to do stuff you don't want to do.
That
I
is
mean,
the, you know what? That is
I,
the
I mean, there's
understatement.
parts of my job I
Um,
don't like. It's just that's why they pay you to do it. And
you
it's true
know,
if you're a business owner,
and
right?
that is the understatement. When COVID hit, many people know this. When COVID hit, we got an email from Amazon that said your product is not an essential item, and therefore you have to ship it out. I knew nothing about shipping. I knew nothing about packaging. I knew nothing. It could have put me under. It could have put me out of business, right? But I always say you turn the bad to good, and I learned it. And I thought, you know what? We're gonna get through this. And we have our own drop shipping station now, and we can ship out all
Yeah,
over the world. So you have to think differently and be open in your career.
that's right.
But one thing I want to ask you, when you interview people, they have the skills, right? But what is it that impresses you about somebody that you might want to hire?
Yeah. I think it's just that I mean, that they want to be, that they want to both learn something and bring something to the job. So, if it's all
Love
about
it.
just, well, what am I going to get out of it if I interview with you, Angela, and what can you do for me, right? That's not a particularly attractive thing. On the other hand, you do want me to be open to learning stuff, because no matter how experienced I am at whatever thing you're hiring me to do, if nothing else, I need to learn your way of doing it, right?
Right,
So and certainly with changing technology, I mean, if we do not do things the same way that we did them 5 years ago at the center.
right,
And I mean, nobody who is still successful in their field of business does. I mean, we're
right,
all changing, like you
right.
said.
Yeah,
So I think that that's part of it. It's got to be people who seem like they will get along with the team.
yeah,
Because, if you kind of come across as somebody who nobody, you don't really want to be around. I mean, you know, why would I want to be around you then? I mean, if you're
right,
not like, and it's not like, oh, you've got to, be somebody who goes out for drinks every Friday or whatever. Because I mean, frankly, nobody does that anymore. But just, while you're around your coworkers, that you can get along with them,
right.
that you are, like you said, a team player, which doesn't always mean that you have to do everything. I mean, if you're second baseman, you play second base, you're not also
Yeah,
catching,
yeah,
but you've got to be good at second base. And that means sometimes you're going to have to cover over toward first base too, whatever, right? I mean, you just have to, I mean,
That's an excellent point because we were between assistants, and somebody was like, "Well, who's going to do this invoicing or something?" And I said, "You are," because we're going to cross train. Everyone needs to know.
right.
You need to know what that assistant does for you to appreciate her, but also to cover for her if she needs to leave or something like that. So
Yep.
we always try to cross train, but I love that. But
It is.
I
Well, and
have,
I want to also say, Angela, one other thing is especially with anything that has to do with money, you cannot, if you're the business owner, and I know this is more for younger people, this podcast, but you cannot let only one person know how to do that because you are then at so much risk. And so, for people who are going into careers where they're involving, managing money or payments or whatever,
yeah,
you want to be aware of that your boss is going to need somebody else to also be able to do your job. And that's not because they don't trust you or they think you're bad or anything like that. It's because there's just too much risk in only one person knowing how to do that. First of all, you could leave and then they're stuck. Or
yes,
second of all, I mean, not that you would, but some people have sometimes are tempted and then they start, it's like, oh, I need to borrow some money for the weekend and I'll pay it back Monday. And the next thing you know, they owe the company $15,000
right.
and they've been embezzling. So you just, that's just something to keep in mind with money specifically, but more broadly, it is definitely true that you want to know, and that is to your benefit. The more, I mean, the amount of stuff that I've learned in my career just from listening to people or people maybe giving me a chance or me having to do something because the person who was supposed to do it wasn't able to or whatever. I mean, that's what positions you for the next gig,
Yes.
whatever that is.
Yes. I want to be clear on something to make sure that everyone understands what you just said. So, if a person is handling money at the top, the CEO, should they have another person that they trust to handle the money as well?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit different. If you're the CEO of your own company, you can't really embezzle from yourself so easily. I
Yeah.
mean, whatever. Now, if
Yeah.
you have business partners, then that is true. But so there's two reasons why you would have that second person. The first would be, to kind of make sure that when the one person goes on vacation, that somebody else can do the job and then can identify, yeah, everything seems to be fine, or, this is kind of strange. What is this account about? But the second thing is from the perspective of a CEO of a privately held company where you're the only owner, you just need somebody who can help you.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and you want to think about, as the CEO, you want to think about what is the best use of my time.
Yes.
And
And yeah, you're
it may
exactly
not
right.
be doing payroll.
Absolutely. I think one of
Mhm.
the things that one of your speakers said, I can't remember who it was, but I remember this. They said, sometimes when you're starting a business, when let's say you're a young person or an older person starting a business,
Mhm.
um, the finances can be so overwhelming.
Yes.
And they said it could be that issue could be handled by hiring a part-time bookkeeper for maybe 5 to 7 hours a week. Something
Right.
as simple as that. I'll give another plug for QuickBooks. They have live bookkeeping. You can do
Yep.
something like that. But there are resources that are available. And so
Yep.
whether you work for the company or you own the company, I think it works both ways. If you can really prove yourself as somebody that's trustworthy to the business owner, you will be
That's
such
right.
a great asset. You will be
Yep.
such a great asset because it's not always easy, being the owner,
Yeah.
right? So that's really interesting. But with your career, one thing I did want to ask, so if you were going to do anything different and you were going to be an architect or something else, what would you have done?
Wow. I don't know
I
because I
love
just
these questions when I
I
can get somebody and they
yeah,
don't, because,
I
you
love
think,
what I mean I love what I do,
yeah.
and I
Or did
kind
you think you would be doing something different?
well, I thought I might be working for the government, whatever that meant to me when I was,
Never too
19
late.
years old.
Never too late, Karen.
And well, it isn't, but I don't want to now. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
I really enjoy what I have found is that I think that my why is helping people achieve their dreams.
Love it.
And that is my dream, right? Is to be able to help you achieve yours. And so I'm in a position where I get to do that, and I get paid for it. I
I
mean, my
love
gosh,
it. I love
it doesn't
that's
get
amazing.
better, right?
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, this is awesome. But I have one last question. If you had two young adults or five young adults sitting in front of you right now, and they said, "Listen, Karen, I went to school to be an attorney, or I did this, but I just really don't know what I want to do in life right now." What advice would you give them?
I think the first thing I would say is try everything. Don't say no to stuff. You know, and you might not like it all. I mean, I'm not saying do everything forever, but try everything. And I also think that kind of related to that is sometimes people can overestimate the importance of a particular decision. I mean, in the sliding doors kind of thing, all decisions are important. I turn left rather than right out of the building, and maybe I get hit by a bus. I mean,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you don't know, you don't have a way of predicting what that is, and so let it go. And if you're deciding, I mean, unless you're in one of those career paths where there's, the only way you're going to be able to get to X is by going through this step, then I guess you're going to have to do that. But just the things change so much. And if you're 20 years old, you're going to be working for 45, 47 more years. And so none of us know what the world's going to be like. I mean,
right,
frankly, in 10 years or 5 years. So, you know, I mean, do what your gut tells you to do now. What seems like a good thing to do, or to some extent, maybe what you have to do, right? I mean, if you're not,
yeah,
whatever, but learn from it. I mean, I have not liked every job I've had, right? But I've learned something
right.
from all of them. And then just, be open to new opportunities. And I don't want to say make yourself indispensable, but as a guy that I worked with years ago said, there's always room in an organization for somebody who said, yeah, I can do that. Then the key is then
I
you have to
love
make sure
that.
that you can do that, right? I mean,
I
yeah,
love
we need somebody to step into this brain surgery, Karen. Let's, go. No,
it.
I don't mean that, but
No, I love that. Yeah, that's
be
great.
willing to help get things done,
Yeah.
and a lot of other problems take care of themselves.
I love that. My mother always said something to me that's always, if I ever got frustrated or got in the middle and I didn't know what to do, she would always say, take a class. And it used to make me really mad because I was like, I don't want to take a class. And she goes, well, take a class until you figure it out. And I was like, and that really got me on a track of really doing
Yeah,
research and learning. So do your
yeah,
research. But yeah,
absolutely.
so that's great advice, Karen, really. And so first of all, if you are a business owner, you're starting out, check out WBDC.org. You're going to learn a lot, but more importantly, listen to this over and over. Karen's giving you some great advice, and because no matter what you're going through, you can do anything. If you put your mind to it and you reach out to the people who can help you and give you the right direction, that is key. So, Karen, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I graciously appreciate your time, and I know you're going to help so many people out there that are in that transition or in a place where they want to do something different. You've probably opened their eyes more than you can imagine.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great, and good luck to everybody out there.
You're welcome. Thank you. You're perfect, man. You are a rock star. You
Oh,
are a rock star. So that was honestly, and I know those went a little bit long on the. These are amazing podcasts, and
oh,
I am
good. I'm
moving
so
these
glad.
up. I am going to tell my producer to move them up because when I'll be on podcasts where it's all about their coaching program, or we don't do many of those anymore, but or whatever. But if I find something that's really helpful to people, I definitely put it out there. And because the conference is coming up, we're going to
Yeah.
get this out there and get this
Oh,
to
good.
you.
Thank
And
you. And
so
if you could, yeah, if you could send me the links when they're up, then I'll share them and everything like that.
that'd
So
be
thank
great. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
You were really great. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna stop recording. I have
Yes.
one
So, yeah,
question
who
for
will we
you.
talk?